Hello guys, it's Amanda and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. Today's video is a very special video because today, as this video is posted, today is my birthday. Today I turn 18 years old. So today what I wanted to do is talk about 18 books that have shaped me into the girl I am today. So let's get right into it. Thank you all to everyone who has wished me happy birthday and to all of your lovely comments and everything. I'm so grateful for all of you, my friends, my family, my followers, everyone. Thank you all so much, and yeah, I'm really just grateful and happy that I have you all here. So I wanted to talk about these 18 books for 18 years. These are probably my favorite books of all time. I could go on. There's way more than 18 books that are my favorite books of all time. But of course, for the sake of today's video, I just picked 18. So these are in no particular order. Well, maybe this stack is in kind of order-ish, but everything else isn't really in order at all. So let's just get started. So I bet some of you can guess my first book. The first book I have here is, of course, Beauty and the Beast. Everyone knows how much Beauty and the Beast is such a big part of me, and ever since I was born, I loved Beauty and the Beast so much. My mother and grandmother took me to see Beauty and the Beast when I was not even 2 years old, and ever since then, I fell in love, and this story means everything to me. It is my absolute dream role to be Belle on Broadway. When I was younger, I would continuously watch the movie over and over again. I know that movie by heart. This book, this movie, this story is just everything to me, and it's one of my favorite things of all time. So, of course, Beauty and the Beast had to be first on this list. The next book I have is another one that is one of my favorites, and that is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I love Peter Pan, and you guys know how much I love Peter Pan retellings, but for the sake of this video, Peter Pan is really special to me because Peter Pan was the very first show I performed in that was a musical theater show. So this was my very first play I was ever in. I was the lead mermaid, Atina, and that was the very first show I was in 2016. That is why Peter Pan is so special to me, because that was the very first show I ever performed in. The next book I have here is, of course, Little Women. This copy is the 2019 replica of the book that they show in the 2019 rendition of Little Women. I love Little Women so much because this story and the movies and the play, the musical, they all really kicked off my love of writing. I've been writing for as long as I can remember, and I watched the movie before I read the book, and when I first watched the movie, I really felt so connected to Jo, of course, because of how much she loved to write and how she just loves and wants to just speak her mind. I absolutely love that. So this book definitely is what kickstarted my journey of writing and writing my own stories or just journaling my own thoughts. Every time I think of Little Women, I think of my love for writing, so that's why I picked this. Next on the list, this book. It was my entire life for about 3 years, I would say. We have Unhooked by Lisa Maxwell. Now, I've never seen this book shown or talked about ever on BookTube, BookTok, Bookstagram, anything. This hasn't really gotten great reviews on GoodReads, but this is of course, a Peter Pan retelling. I read this back in 2019. I don't know, but something in this book just completely changed me. I think this was really my first romantasy book. This is YA, so it's not like full-on spice or anything. This is what really struck a chord in me, where it just renewed my love for reading. I've always loved reading my entire life, but when I read this book, this is the first book that ever made me cry and feel so many emotions. I have multiple copies of this book. This is not my original copy. My original copy of Unhooked is legit so sacred to me. I have it high on a shelf where no one can touch it. But this is the hardcover version, and my mom got this for me for Christmas a couple of years ago because this book is signed by Lisa Maxwell herself. I'm gonna cry already because this book means so much to me. Continuing on with the writing thing, the first big writing project I ever did was I completely rewrote this book. I obviously just did it for my own pleasure. I didn't publish it, and it will never ever be published. But I rewrote this book into a screenplay, and then I rewrote this book from the perspective of our male main character. I wrote it in the perspective of him. That was such a project I worked on, and I wrote it all out and then I typed it all out, and I literally just finished typing out the entire manuscript earlier this year, which was a really big thing for me because like I took almost 5 years to work on that, and that was a really big thing for me. But yeah, that's never ever going to see the light of day. I legit have in my calendar in my phone April 6th, 2019 is when I finished this book. Now I was forever changed. Next book we have is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and that is Lost in a Book by Jennifer Donalyn. This is a retelling of the 2017 version of Beauty and the Beast. This book, I would say, similar to Unhooked, this was one of the first like big books I ever read. I was in 5th grade. I was in 5th grade when I read this, and before that I was always reading, like, I was reading the Ever After High books and the Whatever After books, Goosebumps, and like all of that. This was my first like young adult book, and I call it back then like my big book because I never read a book this long before, and being that it's so close to my heart being Beauty and the Beast, I absolutely loved it, and this is definitely what started the reading young adult books era of me. It is so beautiful, and I still think about it to this day. The beauty of the cover, like, come on, this is so beautiful. So I have this on my Beauty and the Beast shrine in my room. The next book I have here is no surprise, and that is Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Of course, we have Wicked. I went to go see the play back in 2019. Ever since then, I have been changed for good. If you saw my last vlog, you know that I went to go see the movie, and the movie was gorgeous and unlike anything I've ever seen, and like it was pure perfection, as I said before. Just love this, and I love everything related to the Wizard of Oz, and Wicked. Need I say more? Continuing on, the next book I have here is, of course, The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. So yeah, The Wizard of Oz is very special to me because it's similar to Beauty and the Beast, where like I don't remember a time where it wasn't a part of my life. I watched the movie when I was, again, very young, and I watched it over and over again, and all I wanted to do was be Dorothy, and I was Dorothy for many Halloweens. My mother and my grandmother got me like all the dolls, and I had numerous amounts of ruby slippers. It was always a part of me. And in 2021, I had the beautiful privilege to play Glinda in The Wizard of Oz. It's just so beyond special to me, and I absolutely love it because it reminds me just so much of my childhood and just of my childhood magic. I don't want to sound so cliche, but it truly is. I just think of this and I think of just the magic of my childhood, and how like Wizard of Oz and Wicked are both so dear to my heart, and how I get to say that I got to play Glinda in The Wizard of Oz. That's very, very special to me. Wizard of Oz had to be on this list. The next book I have here is technically a big old collection of things, but that is Edgar Allan Poe. Everything of Edgar Allan Poe is all so special to me. The very first poem of Edgar Allan Poe I read was The Raven. I was in 7th grade when I first read The Raven, and then in 8th grade, my English teacher in 8th grade, we had an entire Edgar Allan Poe unit where we just studied everything about him and his poems and his works. I loved all of that because she really made it so fun for everyone. I just remember us playing a game. We played a game of like who killed Edgar Allan Poe, and we all had different parts. And I remember the part I had was Murders of the Rue Morgue. Ever since then, I've absolutely loved Edgar Allan Poe because he's a pretty messed up dude, and he's really hot, and I love him. And of course I love his work. Before I ever learned of Edgar Allan Poe, I really never knew anyone that wrote pure horror and like weird gothic stuff. And when I found Edgar Allan Poe and like everything he does is weird and creepy and scary, I fell in love because of course. The next book, sadly, I do not have with me at the moment because it is still upstairs in my Christmas stuff. So I will put it up on the screen, but the next book is, of course, The Nutcracker. The Nutcracker is so beyond special because for a good 8-9 years of my life, I was a ballerina before I was an actress and a singer. So every single year I would do The Nutcracker. Every single year we would start in like September and work our way to December. That was like, of course, my first start in showbiz, and that's what started everything for me, like legit started everything in my performing arts journey. Every time I hear any of the music from the Nutcracker Ballet, I am immediately transported to that beautiful, beautiful church that we worked at. Of course, I was young back then, and I would look up to the older ballerinas there and see them on their point shoes and dancing so gracefully to this music. I'm like, I want to be Clara and I want to solo in the Nutcracker. Every year I was like, I was always a party guest. There were a lot of years where I was a mouse, and a couple years I was a soldier. A lot of times where I was a flower. I think one of the last Nutcrackers I did, I was a flower. And then of course I was a snowflake, and I was an angel. Like, I was practically everything in the Nutcracker. So I love that story so much because it just reminds me of where I began my performing arts journey. So yeah, it's always a part of me, and I'm very, very grateful for that. As you guys can see, I literally have this sign back here, of course, is the Nutcracker, and my entire Vlogmas intro is all the Nutcracker. So the next book I have here is a really tiny one, but this is of course Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This is my tiny little book, my tiny edition of Alice in Wonderland. This book in particular is very special to me because this book I read to my dog all the time, my dog Sunny. I read this to her, and like we would read it together. Like, I would show her, and like I would just read her stories when she was napping or something. It's very similar to the books I've been speaking about. I've always loved Alice in Wonderland, and I so distinctly remember where my mom and grandmother, we would always travel to New York. We still do, obviously, till this day. The one year they took me to a Alice in Wonderland tea party, a tea house, and it was all Alice in Wonderland themed. That was everything to me, and I still have to this day bought like little tiny teacup sets, and I still have them. Tea in general is very important to me and my mother, and was with my grandmother also. So every time we have tea, I think of Alice in Wonderland. And of course, I always watched the original Disney movie, and then slowly I watched the Johnny Depp version of Alice in Wonderland. Of course I loved that because I love my Johnny Depp. Alice in Wonderland, I was always in love with. I did perform in Alice in Wonderland, the ballet too. I did do other ballet than the Nutcracker, so that's how that ties in. Next is, it's like all I've been talking about is just theater and performing arts, but I don't care. I think this is the last one that has anything to do with theater, I think. Phantom of the Opera, need I say more? I saw the Phantom of the Opera back in 2022, and I was blown away. I was blown away because I have always loved opera and theater, and when I saw this, I knew that they can be both. Both can be mushed together and be a beautiful gothic piece that the Phantom of the Opera is. I still, to this day, get chills when I hear Big Overture of the Phantom of the Opera by Andrew Lloyd Webber, of course. Ever since I've seen this, it is an absolute dream to be in this show. I'm manifesting that. The next book is The Secret. This is probably one of the most important books on this list. I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary of my spiritual awakening. I first learned of The Secret and the Law of Attraction from my dear friend Brittany Crabb here on YouTube. She made a video talking about her experience and how she had her spiritual awakening of learning what the Law of Attraction was and manifesting. Yes, so I read this book then in 2019. I love just the idea of the Law of Attraction. Even now as I'm looking back, like, Secret was just the start of my journey. Ever since then, I've just like been gung-ho about all of manifestation, using not just the Law of Attraction, but so many other different techniques. But The Secret is basically a spiritual work on how the Law of Attraction works, and basically how you can create your dream life if you put your mind to it. And I know it sounds very cliche, but it is seriously so true, and this book dives deep into it with scientific evidence of how you can attract things into your life, both good and bad. I read this book and it really helped me understand how everything works, but of course this just really was the start of it. Going on with that topic of manifestation, the next book I have here is by Gabrielle Bernstein, and that is The Universe Has Your Back. I learned of Gabby Bernstein from one of my aunts. She told me about her and told me, hey, you need to look her up. If you're into this manifestation stuff, you need to look her up. So she sent me these books, and she actually gifted me the challenge that Gabby does every single year, her manifestation challenge that she does every January, and I've been doing that for a couple years now. This is just her rendition of how manifestation works, how the law of attraction works, and how she's used it in her life. So this is basically a memoir while also being a how-to. This was the first book I read of hers. There is obviously, she has many more books than this, but this was the first book. So I definitely owe a lot of my spiritual teachings to Gabby Bernstein. Next, we have Dracula by Bram Stoker. I love vampires. I love everything vampires. I love Dracula. I love every single Dracula retelling that there is. So, of course, I love the freaking source material for all this gorgeousness that has come into this world of vampires. So I read Dracula for the first time just last year, actually, and I read it from audiobook and physical, and I really loved it. I really loved the book. It really helped me like understand more of the lore behind Dracula and Bram Stoker himself. I just love the idea of vampires and how many different types of vampires there are and all the different legends and lore there are. Bram Stoker's version of a vampire is my favorite vampire. I really, really loved this. This is definitely one of my favorite classics of all time. I just love gothic literature, and this is the most gothic literature you can get. Going off the vampire theme, I should take that back. Maybe Bram Stoker's vampire is not my favorite because we have Stephenie Meyer's version of a vampire. We have Twilight. I love Twilight. I am still a twihard at heart, and I know people think it's cringy. I know people think that it may not be the best thing. I know people think that the books are better than the movies. They are, but also the movies are phenomenal too. I first read Twilight, so I watched the movies before I read the books. I read the books when I was in 7th grade, and I loved them so very much. I read them back to back, literally back to back. I watched all 5 movies, and then I read all 4 books right after, and I'm still so in love with Twilight to this day. When Midnight Sun came out in 2020, I was beyond happy because in 2019 I was in 7th grade. The next year Midnight Sun came out, and I was like, I felt so seen when that came out. So I absolutely love Twilight and everything Twilight related. Next, I have Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. This is very important to me because I've said this before. I love Practical Magic, the movie. I did not love the book as much. I love this because my mother was is still so in love with Practical Magic. She loved it when she watched it and when she read the books. And my singing teacher, my aunt Katrina, and her sister Celia were also so in love with Practical Magic. So we all bonded over Practical Magic. So when I think of Practical Magic, I think of my mom and my aunties and how we're all so witchy in our own way. We're connected by the love of magic and our love for each other, and fall in love whenever you can. What can I say? Next, I have A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was my first ever romantasy book, like full-on romantasy book. I read this series when I was in 8th grade, going into 9th. Oh my god, I loved this. Like, I really, really loved this whole series. It's one of my favorite series, especially within the romantasy genre, sub-genre, I should say. This was my first real, my first real smut book. But no, really, this was my first, really high fantasy book, and intricate worlds and intricate magic systems, getting into a long series that wasn't Twilight. This whole series I love to death, and I still think of it to this day. I still save fan art to my Pinterest boards. I'm still loving this to this day. And finally, the last book I have here, again, is not just a book, it is an entire author. I have Emily Dickinson. I just started my love for Emily Dickinson this year. Again, Emily Dickinson, I love her poetry, I love her style, and I love that she has those gothic undertones within her writing, and I just love her as a person, of everything I've read about her. And of course I loved the Emily Dickinson show with Haley Steinfeld. Everything about Emily Dickinson I absolutely love, and it would be an absolute dream come true to go to her house. She really inspires my writing. Like I said, I love her writing style, and I feel like my writing style has a similar feel to hers, because my writing does have a bit of a melancholy undertone about grief and dark things that she always puts in her poems, but there's also, of course, the underlying sense of hope. Hope is the thing with feathers. I really love Emily Dickinson, and I hope to be as good of a writer as her one day. That is the last book I have. Those are all 18 books that I have to show to you today. So those were 18 books for 18 years. I love every single book on this list so dearly. Every one of these books has shaped me into who I am today, and I am very, very grateful for every single book. So that is going to be the end of today's video. Again, thank you all so much for your loving words and loving wishes for my birthday. Thank you guys so much. If you enjoyed today's video, please give this video a big thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you have not already, and click the notification bell so you'll be notified every single time that I upload. I upload every single week. And if you want to find me anywhere else for any more bookish content like this, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, GoodReads, Pinterest, and in between the pages of a book. And as always, remember to be the Captain Jack Sparrow of your story, and may your compass lead you to amazing things. And I shall see you guys in my next video. Bye guys. Happy reading.